My name is Alan Palais, and this is the Sunday morning service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Potsdam. I am a member of the congregation and will be leading the service today. We are a congregation that welcomes all, whether you're seeing us with spirits high or spirits low, we welcome you. Whether your beliefs tend toward atheism or theism, liberalism or conservatism, we welcome you. So whoever you are, wherever you are, whomever you love, we are glad you are with us today. Unitarian Universalism is built on 7 ethical principles. They are written on the side of your order of service. In addition to these principles, our UU culture promotes the notion that wisdom can be found from many sources, with a special place held by reason and science. But it can also be found in the arts and humanities and in spiritual intuition. We believe we have much to learn from the great thinkers of the past, but in building the future, we are not permanently tied to any theology or ideology. With these values in mind, we consider a wide array of topics at our various Sunday morning services. And we have a wide array of speakers, including guest ministers like we have today, members of our congregation, and lay speakers from outside our fellowship. Okay, we're ready for announcements. I will make one quick announcement. The first hymn is from the Teal hymnal. Any other announcements?
Hi, I'm Kay. Look at all the people here. I'm just going to make an announcement about snack today, coffee hour. I'm going to set up outside, but whoever wants to, I already had one complaint about how hot it is, so whoever feels comfortable eating inside, you know, that's perfectly fine. But I have a little cold and I still want to eat. So that's my announcement. Snack is outside, but if you prefer to be inside in the cool, be my guest.
Any other announcements? We now come to lighting the chalice. I offer these words as we do so. They are written by the minister, Unitarian Universalist minister, Reverend Sunshine Jeremiah Wolf. I thank Reverend Marshall for bringing them to my attention. This is a congregation that gathers in faith. Not in one religion or one God or any one way. We gather in faith in the power of diversity, the power of love, and the hope of a world transformed by our care. We gather in faith in ourselves and in those around us. Not a faith that requires perfection or rightness in one another. Rather a faith that in our shared imperfection, we may learn to stumble and fall together. Faith that we will help one another to rise and to try again and again. Come, let us worship together. We will now have hymn 1064 in the Teal hymnal, Blue Bullet Home.
Oh
come to the Story for All Ages. We're lucky to have Ruby to do this for us each Sunday morning, or most Sunday mornings.
I lost this like a month ago. I only have it back. Yeah, it was in one of the books. Hi.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Miss Ruby, and I have a story for all ages today. And it should be up on the monitors. Is it going up on the monitors?
Going up on the monitors?
Is it the story?
Did you send me something?
Yes, I did.
No, I don't have it.
That's okay. My phone's what? You don't want to know. Okay, so today's story is called Ricky the Rock That Couldn't Roll. And the pictures are really cute, but I'll just have to hold up my phone for the kids. Over the lake and out past the bay was a green grassy hill where the rocks came to play. They would race to the top to take in the view, then roll their way down the way rocks love to do. There was Kip, Pip, and Chester, and Marvin the Boulder. Ignatius played too, though he was much older. And a group called the Pebbles never ever sat still, zigzagging their way up and over the hill. Kai was a meteorite and not from this planet, and Maya was lava, but taken for granite. Stu was the smart one. Parker the clown and grumpy old Ebert rolled round with a frown. Gabby was sassy. Lizzie had flair. Emma was giggly, and Hud had black hair. But the one trait that seemed to be shared by them all was that every rock there was shaped like a ball. And because they were round, they could easily roll through the grass, past the lake, up and over the knoll. All the rocks rolling around on my itty bitty little phone screen. Can you guys see the pictures?
Yeah.
You guys, yeah? You want to come closer? Okay. Except for poor Rocky, who quietly sat. You see, Rick couldn't roll because one side was flat. See, it was flat. It's like I'm flat on one side. I can only sit here. There are all the other rocks rolling down the hill having fun. Ricky's stuck. His friends didn't get it. Come roll, they would chant. So Ricky tried, but replied, I'm sorry,
I can't. But the rocks were determined. They were sure they could solve Ricky's flat-sided problem and help him revolve. So Marvin, the boulder, with his impressive physique, carried Rick all the way up to the hill's grassy peak. Then he pushed him downhill, yelling, "Keep rolling, kid!" But Rick didn't roll. He just kind of slid. You see him going down the hill? Can you see? Okay. And he's saying, "This feels like a bad idea." Well, the rocks weren't done, not by a mile. Surely this next try would get Rick to smile. They stuck rubber balls all over Rick, using big gobs of glue to get them to stick. They were proud of themselves. "This will work," they announced. But Ricky couldn't roll. Now he just sort of bounced. Do you see him? And there's a cartoon bubble, and he's saying, "No good, no good, no good." I don't think he likes bouncing all out of control, because he can't steer himself like he would if he could roll. Well, they pushed and they pulled, trying each every way to get Rick to roll, but by the end of the day, nothing had worked, just like Rick expected, and he ended up feeling depressed and dejected. "It's no use," Ricky sighed. "There just isn't a way, so I'll sit off to the side and watch you all play." There he is. Really sad. See him? It's really sad. Looks like he might cry. But the friends wouldn't quit. "We're here for you, brother, and we'll get you to roll one way or another." So they pondered and thought, each straining his brain, till they looked up and saw it was starting to rain. Oh, and that's when it hit the smart stone named Stu. "Eureka," he shouted, "I know just what to do." He explained to them how they would get Rick to tumble. "My plan is pure genius." Stu wasn't too humble. So they carried our hero down the road about a mile to the lake, where they gathered up mud they could pile on the flat side of Rick, creating a mound that they shaped, smoothed, and sculpted until it was round. Then after the rain, with the sun in the sky, they left him to bake till the mud was all dry. They gathered up vines and one colorful feather that they wrapped all round Rick to keep it together. Do you guys see him now? It's like half rock and half mud bake. That's right. When the last knot was tied and the work was all done, the only step left was for Rick to have fun. They stood back and watched, feeling nervous and tense, as Rick breathed in deep with increasing suspense. He moved slowly at first, testing out his new mold, and then, for the first time, Ricky the Rock rolled. Going yippee wee as he rolled down the hill. So Bria, the ladybug who'd been there from the start, felt a surge of pure joy swell up in her heart. She thought as she watched her friends play on the hill that there's always a way if there's always a will. And she said to herself as Ricky rolled down the slope, "When you're surrounded by love, you always have hope."
The end.
Thank you, Ruby. That was charming, that story. We now come to the offering.
Just go with it.
We all contribute a great deal to our fellowship, in the work we do and in the money we pledge. Our basket collections provide a small but not insignificant part of our income. So each Sunday, we pass the basket to help keep our fellowship going. We haven't had a choir for almost 2 years now, but now I'm happy to say, it's not on the order of service because the order of service was printed earlier, but our choir did get themselves ready to entertain us with a song. So I call the choir up and ask them to begin. Pleasure to hear our choir starting up. The sermon we will hear this morning is related to our second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. So I offer this reading from the UU minister, Mark Ward. Our first principle calls on us to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. But just proclaiming that doesn't take us very far. The second principle, we covenant to affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, points to the consequences of that commitment. It gives us our marching orders, and it connects us to admonitions that we can trace back centuries to the Hebrew Scriptures. In the 16th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy, where God charges those in positions of power, he warns that we must deal with everyone fairly. Quote, justice, only justice you shall pursue. Most of us are not in a position of power, and we know that our individual impact on the world is very small. So how do we think about our role in following the second principle? Reverend Marshall's sermon will give us insight into that question. We will now have hymn 131, Love Will Guide Us. Thank you, Carl. Our order, this comes on and off. Our order of service is a little bit out of order today. The next item is a reading, but I'm going to introduce the speaker before that, and then the reading will come, and then the sermon. Reverend Beth Marshall is a lifelong Unitarian. Since her ordination in January 2002, she has served congregations in New York, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Ohio in a variety of ministerial roles. I became enthusiastic about inviting her to speak here after seeing a recorded sermon she gave, reading about her theological orientation, and her description of the interesting and important questions that she has been considering over her years of ministry. So I am delighted she accepted my invitation. Reverend Marshall.
Thank you. Our reading this morning. This may be tricky with the feedback. It may take me a minute to get it. Our reading this morning is written by Susan Cook Kitteridge and is titled "We All Need Mending." Susan Cook Kitteridge is senior minister at Old Meeting House in Montpelier, Vermont. You may have heard of her father, Alistair Cook. She writes this: I can knit, but I cannot sew new creations from tissue paper patterns. Recently, though, I have come to relish the moment that I sit down and clumsily repair a torn shirt, hem a skirt, patch a pair of jeans, and believe that I believe in mending. It is a time to stop, a time to quit running around. It is a time to sow actual roots together. I can't stop the war in Iraq. I can't reverse global warming. I can't solve the many problems of my world or community, but I can mend things at hand. I can darn a pair of socks. Mending something is different from fixing it. Fixing it suggests that evidence of the problem will disappear. When we mend broken relationships, we realize that we're better together than apart, and perhaps even stronger for the rip and the repair. Mending doesn't say this thing never happened. It says instead, something or someone was surely broken here, but it will rise to new life. So too, my old pajamas, the fence around the garden, the friendship torn by misunderstanding, a country torn apart by economic and social inequity, and a global divide of enormous proportions, they all need mending. I'm starting with the pajamas. I believe that each of us is a healer. I believe that we can each mend something. Some of us are called to heal the environment, others to heal relationships. Some are called to heal our systems of justice and education, others called to mend fences and ancient plumbing. Some are called to mend the technology that links us together, and others to mend pajamas. The point being that each of us has within it ourselves to heal something, to mend something, small or large, monumental or seemingly insignificant. Our world needs some mending. Perhaps you are familiar with the Jewish term tikkun olam. It points our attention toward the moral imperative and the human longing to heal the world. Rachel Naomi Remen explains it this way. In the beginning of the creation, something happened, and the original light of the universe shattered into countless pieces. It lodged as shards of light inside each aspect of the creation. The highest human calling is to look for this light, to point at it when we see it, to gather it up, and in so doing, repair the world. She continued. This is an important story for our time because this story insists that each and every one of us, frail and flawed as we may be, inadequate as we may feel, has exactly what we need to repair the part of the world that we can see and touch. I think that bears repetition. Each and every one of us, frail and flawed as we may be, inadequate as we may feel, has exactly what is needed to repair the part of the world that we can see and touch. As Unitarian Universalists, this idea manifests itself in all the ways we acknowledge that the world and her people are broken and hurting. For while we each carry a spark of the divine, some call it our inherent worth and dignity, it is also possible that we too are broken, hurting, discouraged. This has been a long year or two. Few of us are completely unscathed. In such moments, where do you find inspiration and healing? Art, sacred texts, poetry, nature, music? I often turn to stories of real people doing real work in the world. Let me share a story. Once upon a time, there was a man who studied the Bible for 5 years, and he noticed one word appearing at the end of many of the Psalms. The word was Selah. In its original context, Selah means to pause and reflect. It is as though the author is saying, you've read or heard my word. Now take a moment and think about it. Over time, the man expanded the traditional definition this way: to pause and stop, to reflect and think, to take care of Mother Nature, and to share it. Today, he's an outspoken environmentalist, a teacher, and a healer of the world. Selah defines his life. His name is David Bamberger, and he grew up on a small farm in Navarre, Ohio, during the Great Depression. Like Amish families who lived nearby, his family lived off the land. His mother was adamantly opposed to manufactured food, so David and his two older brothers were often sent out into the nearby woods to forage for berries, nuts, and greens. Anything they could gather off of the land was valued and never wasted. His mother modeled a spirit of welcoming and inclusivity. Their farm was within walking distance of the train stop, and it was common for men to jump off the train and look for work. They also hoped to find a place to sleep and a hot meal. Though the family barely had enough for themselves, they shared with those who had even less. Years later, while his mother was working at a local hospital, she invited all of her co-workers to a picnic. This is at a time when it was rare for Black families and white families to socialize, but she believed if we work together, we should socialize together. It was that simple. David Bamberger's early life was not easy or perfect. He would be the first not to romanticize it. But despite the challenges, those early years taught him to care for the land as though our lives depended on it. He learned to work hard, to take the long-term view. He learned not to waste, to share what he had, and to persist creatively, even in the face of resistance and doubt. One of his favorite books was Louis Bromfield's Pleasant Valley. And he said that if I ever make enough money, I want to do what Bromfield did, namely restore a farm to its potential or better. After earning a Bachelor in Science at Kent State University in Ohio, he entered the workforce, selling Kirby vacuum cleaners door to door. A colorful series of friendships and adventures led to a wildly successful career, which included becoming part owner and co-chair of Church's Fried Chicken. Now that would have been enough for some people, but David Bamberger had other dreams. Those 5 years spent studying the Bible not only introduced him to the word Selah, but it gave him an idea. He knew that if he ever had a ranch, it would carry that name. Today, 5,500 acres outside of Austin are known as the Selah Ranch and Preserve, David Bamberger's Selah Ranch and Preserve. But that wasn't always the case. Overworked and overgrazed, those acres were considered by local ranchers and real estate experts as the very worst tract of land in Blanco County and in all of the Texas Hill Country. No one wanted that acreage. But that's exactly what Bamberger was looking for, a piece of land that could be healed, could be transformed into a place of beauty. He believed it could be done, and he was the one to do it. When he purchased those acres, there was no water anywhere. A hired team dug multiple wells, each to a depth of 500 feet, and each came up dry. Wildlife was absent, save for a small head small herd of underfed deer, and a few species of birds. Yet somehow, David Bamberger saw the potential. He believed this land could be healed. It took decades of hard work and sweat and commitment to repair the land. Acres of invasive species were replaced with deep-rooted native grasses to hold the rainwater. In time, Bamberger's persistence and a willingness to try unconventional techniques restored the topsoil and brought water back to the land. Underground aquifers now overflow with renewed springs. Those 5,500 acres of wasteland have been transformed into a place of wild and natural beauty. The aquifers now help quench the thirst of the nearby city of Austin. Selah Ranch and Preserve is now considered the largest habitat restoration project in the state of Texas. Students from the Austin schools come to the ranch to experience the wildness of nature, to learn about water and insects, to watch birds in flight, and to let their souls be touched. They come to stop and pause, to think and reflect. They come to share Mother Nature and to think about it. Led by a team of professional biologists and conservationists, the ranch also offers programs for Texas landowners, encouraging greater understanding of land stewardship and preservation. When I first heard of David Bamberger's work, two things stood out: his vision of what could be and his commitment to share the renewed land. He is very much still alive, and despite COVID restrictions, is sharing his message. I do believe that each one of us, young or old, wealthy or poor, left-leaning or right-leaning, wants to do something to make the world a better place. Our methods may vary, our resources and skill sets may be radically different, even our goals may differ. But I believe that each of us is capable of mending or repairing something. Some of us are able to shepherd the big projects to completion, and others of us prefer to work in our neighborhoods. Let me tell you another story. I had a dear neighbor who worked quietly behind the scenes. With her arms wide open, she cared for her large extended family, her church people, and anyone else lucky enough to know her. Until a series of mini strokes slowed her down, Linnell was unstoppable, quietly mending one life at a time. Together with her husband, they raised half a dozen children and then fostered at least that many. When she spoke of her kids, it was hard to know if she meant the ones that she personally raised, the ones they fostered, or just kids she'd taken under her wing, because they all became her kids. After her husband's death, she kept her home open to an assortment of teens and young adults in need. Some stayed for a night or two on the couch, others for a week or two in the spare room. Linnell fed them warm meals, gave them a safe space, listened to them, and made sure they had responsibilities. As point person in her church, Linnell was the one who always knew who needed what. She found a mattress for a young couple that was sleeping on the floor. She delivered boxes of food to young mothers who were struggling to feed their kids. She knew who needed an unused pack and play, or bed linens, or a dresser, or who would welcome late season excess tomatoes and zucchini. You could see her loading up an old table sitting on the curb lawn, or she'd tell of filling her trunk with cans of vegetables from Aldi's. She knew who needed what and saw that they got it. She was a magician at reusing and reinventing what others discarded. She made new out of the old. As matriarch of her AME church and guardian of the neighborhood, Linnell gently shared her belief in how God works in the world and what it means to be a good human being. She believed that community is built by bringing together a handful of people around a dinner table. And from there, she knew that honest and sometimes hard conversations would flow. And from there, change was possible. Linnell was a firm believer in the power of prayer, the power of a community garden, and the unwavering power of a strong cup of coffee. I treasure the mornings we sat in the shade of her driveway or on our front porch, sharing coffee, along with something sweet and sticky. And after catching up on all the neighborhood gossip, we would talk about what we might do to make our neighborhood a little stronger. I watched for years as Linnell embodied Tikkun Olam, doing something each day to heal her small corner of the world, even during COVID. A Maryland colleague writes this: Tikkun Olam has to do with discovering what people need, what we have to give, and what we need to give others to feel more whole ourselves. We are a broken, hurting people, she writes, and the world is a broken, hurting place. We reach out to others, offering what comfort and energy we have, and we are brought closer to the wholeness where we are healed and we can heal others. As a faith tradition, we are keenly aware of the depth and breadth the challenges are facing the world. The events of the last several months are enough to frustrate and paralyze even the most committed of activists. Between unrelenting heat waves, wildfires, the invasion of Ukraine, between the fall of Roe, questions about same-sex marriage, the availability of contraception, and all the mass shootings, many people in my circles are beginning to wonder what to do, where to begin, and if our small individuals' efforts can make a change. And yet, it isn't that different from the old story about the woman who was walking on the beach, throwing stranded starfish back in the water, one after the other. When asked why she was doing it, because she can't possibly throw them all back in, she simply replies, because it makes a difference to this one, and throws another one back in the ocean. In the networks I'm connected with, I'm seeing a growing yearning to heal and to mend. There is so much that needs our love, that pulls at us for our help, that calls for repair, that like a beach filled with stranded starfish, it can be overwhelming. The questions are consistently the same. Where to start? What's to be given top priority? Where do we find the resources? Making those choices is hard because it all matters so very much. Early on in my ministry, I sat in on too many well-intentioned meetings where after 3 hours, no decision had been made, no projects had been chosen, because to choose one or two meant not choosing all the rest. Then a shift in thinking led to a different kind of approach. What if instead of trying to do them all, we chose one or two, but did them really well? And what if we did them in a way and on a scale that would make an impact, but doesn't exhaust our people? One popular option emerged. The congregation would commit to one local project and one on a more global or national scale, and then reevaluate the commitment annually. Before this latest round of crises, one tiny but mighty congregation I know well landed on a creative way to address poverty's impact on families in their community. After finally accepting that opening a daycare center or preschool in their building were both out of the question, they came up with the idea of working in collaboration with the county's local diaper bank and having regular diaper drives. So now several times a year, they collect several thousand diapers, which in turn allow parents to go to work and their children to go to daycare. Many daycare facilities, we learned, require parents to provide their own diapers and wipes, and if they're unable to do that, their children can't attend, which means the parents can't work or go to school. On the day of the diaper drive, a sandwich board outside the church directs donors to the drop-off point, where 1 or 2 members of the church assist with unloading. Most of the advertising is even handled by the diaper bank itself. Now they know that a diaper drive 3 times a year will not solve poverty in their community. They know that. However, having a fresh supply of diapers helps a significant number of parents do what they need to do to care for their families and thrive, not just survive. A diaper drive will not heal the wounds left by generations of poverty, but it can perhaps help families mend their current situation just enough. And that just enough can make all the difference. This small congregation has found a way to embody both tikkun olam and Selah. They stopped and paid attention. They thought and reflected, and then they found a way to move forward with intention. The lists of needs and challenges always will exceed our individual ability to meet them. That is the nature of the world we live in. Part of embracing Selah and living in the spirit of tikkun olam is recognizing what is possible and then doing nothing less. Recently, the list of challenges and issues facing us as a nation and as a planet has grown exponentially. Rights we once believed were guaranteed have been stripped away, and others, it seems, may also be at risk. Fear and anxiety, anger and frustration have become frequent companions for many of us, but we need not let them rule our lives. My hunch is that many of you have had conversations in the last month or so that have spiraled through shock and anger, despair, grief, and fear. And finally, we get to the place where we're asking those same questions of ourselves again and again. What can I do? How can my small efforts make a difference? Where do we begin? Which is most important to do first? And where do we find the resources? I go back to Rachel Naomi Raymond. Each and every one of us, frail and flawed as we may be, inadequate as we may feel, has exactly what is needed to repair the part of the world we can touch. The resources we have are within reach. Our success depends in part on the limits of our creativity, our commitment, and our willingness to step outside of our comfort zones. We don't need to do everything ourselves, but we must do the one thing, the 2 things that we can do. Our larger faith community is built on a network of diverse congregations. We have a wealth of interfaith connections and countless secular organizations on the state or national level to work with. The extent of this network means that collaborations with others multiplies our individual efforts and increases our potential for success. This network is a huge resource that must not be ignored. We know how to magnify strength by increasing our numbers. Together, we can draw upon our deep and diverse roots, restoring justice to a parched and thirsty land. Doing it alone is no longer an option. There are real issues facing us as a society, and we have the tools to address them. Holding both our strengths and our frailties, may we find the courage to do exactly what is needed today, to restore ruins of generations, to bind up the broken, and to mend our small corner of the world. We know what we need to do. Some of us will start by opening conversations with neighbors and maybe even strangers. Some of us will start by writing more postcards, sending more emails, making more phone calls. Some of us will take to the streets. Others still will start by mending fences and old pajamas. As we breathe in peace, we breathe out love. So may it be. Amen. Selah.
Thank you, Reverend Beth.
Welcome.
Everybody can heal something. I like that. That was very moving to me. It gives dignity to people who do the small things that they're capable of. And it's not just the large things that deserve recognition. Well, now we have a hymn that I think is singable and is one that I like very much. We'll Build a Land, 121. We now come to extinguishing the chalice. I invite Reverend Marshall, who has words for this event, to share those words with us. Reverend Marshall.
These words were written by Mahatma Gandhi. A principle is a principle, and in no case can it be watered down because of our inability to live it in practice. We have to strive to achieve it, and the striving should be conscious, deliberate, and hard. Go in peace. Amen. Blessed be.
Thank you, Reverend Marshall. That was very, very inspiring, and I enjoyed that very much. Now we will end the recording and go to joys and concerns.